In the quaint town of Maplewood, Missouri, life seemed to flow smoothly, punctuated by the rhythmic seasons and the gentle hum of daily routines. Nestled among rolling green hills and shaded by towering oak trees was the Harper family's Victorian house, a grand but weathered structure that had seen generations come and go. It was here that Ethan Harper, a 21-year-old college student, lived with his mother, Helen, and his grandmother, Margaret. Ethan was a history major at the local university, a young man with a sharp mind and a contemplative demeanor. Despite his academic achievements and the seemingly perfect life he led, there was a gnawing emptiness that he struggled to understand. His relationship with his mother had always been strained, characterized by a mutual misunderstanding and a lack of emotional connection. Helen, a high school teacher, was often preoccupied with her demanding job and the burdens of maintaining the family's outward appearance of success. Margaret Harper, at 72 years old, was the matriarch of the Harper family. She had long been the pillar of their lives, known in the town for her philanthropic work and her warm, gracious personality. To the outside world, Margaret was the epitome of grace and strength, having played a crucial role in shaping the community's charitable landscape. However, beneath her poised exterior, Margaret harbored secrets that she had carefully buried over the decades. The family's life appeared idyllic, a portrait of contentment and harmony. Ethan admired his grandmother greatly, often seeing her as the central figure who held the family together. Margaret's stories of the past were a source of fascination for him, tales that painted a picture of a life filled with adventure and romance. Despite this admiration, Ethan could not ignore the undercurrent of dissatisfaction that seemed to shadow his grandmother's life, a subtle melancholy that she never fully disclosed. One crisp autumn afternoon, Ethan found himself rummaging through the attic, a space that had long been forgotten. The attic, filled with the accumulated dust of years gone by, was a trove of memories and relics. While sorting through boxes of old photographs and faded letters, Ethan stumbled upon a large, ornate trunk. Its brass fittings were tarnished, and the wood was scuffed, but it exuded an air of hidden significance. Curiosity piqued, Ethan pried open the trunk. Inside, he discovered a collection of old letters, each sealed in delicate envelopes and marked with elegant handwriting. The letters were dated from several decades earlier and were addressed to Margaret. As Ethan carefully unfolded the yellowed paper, he realized that they were love letters, filled with passionate declarations and intimate sentiments. The writer of the letters was a man named Robert Sinclair, a name Ethan had never heard before. The content of the letters revealed a fervent affair between Margaret and Robert, a relationship that had apparently ended in tragedy. The letters spoke of clandestine meetings, stolen moments, and a deep, consuming love. They hinted at a dramatic and sorrowful conclusion, but the details were vague and the final letter was left unfinished. Ethan's discovery unsettled him. He had always seen his grandmother as a figure of stability and grace, but these letters painted a different picture, one of forbidden love and hidden sorrow. The realization that his grandmother had once been entangled in a passionate and secretive affair shook him to the core. He wondered why Margaret had kept these letters hidden for so long, and what had ultimately led to their separation. Margaret's behavior had always been slightly enigmatic. Although she was beloved by many and had a reputation for being a generous and caring woman, Ethan had sensed an underlying sadness in her demeanor. The letters seemed to provide a clue, but they raised more questions than answers. What had happened to Robert Sinclair? Why had Margaret chosen to keep this part of her life so meticulously concealed? The trunk and its contents became a focal point of Ethan's thoughts. He began to notice subtle changes in Margaret's behavior. She appeared more distant, her once lively conversations now tinged with an air of apprehension. Helen, too, seemed more on edge, her interactions with Margaret marked by an unspoken tension that Ethan couldn't quite decipher. One evening, as Ethan sat alone in the attic, he replayed the letters in his mind, trying to piece together the fragments of a story that had been kept hidden for decades. The more he pondered, the more he became convinced that the past had not been buried as deeply as he had once believed. The letters suggested a drama that had never been fully resolved, a story that had left a lingering impact on the present. As Ethan prepared to confront Margaret with his discovery, he was overwhelmed by a mixture of anticipation and dread. He knew that uncovering the truth would likely disrupt the fragile balance of their family life, but he felt compelled to seek answers. The secrets hidden within those letters seemed to demand resolution, and Ethan found himself caught between respect for his grandmother's privacy and a burgeoning need to understand the truth. The stage was set for a confrontation that would unravel the carefully maintained facade of the Harper family. Ethan's discovery had introduced a crack in the surface of their seemingly perfect life, and as he prepared to delve deeper into the mystery, he could not foresee the turbulent events that were about to unfold. The hidden truths of Margaret's past were poised to collide with the present, setting off a chain of events that would irrevocably alter the lives of those involved. Ethan's discovery of the letters marked the beginning of a journey that would unravel the fragile stability of his family's life. Driven by a mix of curiosity and unease, he embarked on a quest to uncover the full story behind Margaret's hidden past. As he delved deeper, the secrets that had been buried for decades began to emerge, casting a shadow over the seemingly perfect facade of the Harper family. The initial shock of the letters had left Ethan restless. He spent countless hours rereading the faded pages, attempting to piece together the fragmented story of Margaret and Robert Sinclair. The letters spoke of a passionate affair that had been cut short by an untimely and mysterious end. Ethan's sense of unease grew with each passing day as he grappled with the implications of what he had found. Determined to understand the full extent of his grandmother's secret, Ethan began his investigation by reaching out to old acquaintances of Margaret's. One name that repeatedly surfaced was Laura Bennett, a local historian who had known Margaret during the earlier years of her life. Laura was known for her knowledge of the town's history and her connections with its prominent families. Ethan hoped that Laura might shed some light on Margaret's past. Ethan arranged a meeting with Laura, under the pretense of seeking information for a university project on local history. Laura, a woman in her late 50s with a sharp intellect and a reserved demeanor, welcomed Ethan into her study. Cluttered room filled with stacks of books and historical documents. The room was lined with shelves, each holding artifacts and records from the town's past. Laura's keen eyes observed Ethan with a mixture of curiosity and wariness as they settled into armchairs. Their conversation began with casual inquiries about historical events and local figures, but Ethan gradually steered the discussion towards Margaret. He mentioned the letters he had discovered and asked if Laura knew anything about Robert Sinclair. Laura's reaction was immediate and guarded. Her usually composed demeanor faltered as she hesitated before responding. "I remember Margaret mentioning someone named Robert," Laura said cautiously, "but it was always in vague terms. She was a private person, even back then." Ethan sensed that Laura was holding back information. He pressed further, asking about any significant events or scandals involving Margaret during her younger years. Laura shifted uncomfortably, her fingers nervously drumming on the armrest of her chair. "There were whispers," Laura admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Margaret had a reputation for being involved in complex relationships, but I'm afraid I don't know the details. I was only a peripheral observer to those events." The conversation left Ethan feeling more unsettled than before. Laura's evasive answers only deepened the mystery surrounding Margaret's past. He left Laura's house with a renewed sense of urgency, determined to uncover more about Robert Sinclair and his connection to his grandmother. In the days that followed, Ethan continued his investigation by speaking to other townspeople who might have known Margaret or Robert. His inquiries led him to various individuals who had been part of the community during the time of the affair. Each conversation added pieces to the puzzle, but also raised new questions. One evening, as Ethan was sifting through old town records in the local library, he stumbled upon an archived newspaper article that mentioned Robert Sinclair. The article, dated several decades earlier, reported the disappearance of Robert, who had been a local journalist with a promising career. The disappearance was linked to a series of personal and professional troubles, but no concrete information about his fate was provided. The article piqued Ethan's interest. It seemed to corroborate the timing of the letters and suggested that Robert's disappearance had been a significant event in the town's history. Ethan began to wonder if there was more to Robert's story than what had been publicly known. Meanwhile, Margaret's behavior became increasingly erratic. She seemed to sense that Ethan was probing into her past and became more withdrawn. Her once warm and engaging conversations with Ethan were now marked by silence and evasive responses. It was clear that she was aware of his growing curiosity and was struggling to maintain a facade of normalcy. Helen, Ethan's mother, also began to notice the changes in Margaret's behavior. Their strained relationship had always been characterized by an emotional distance, but now Helen's concern for her mother's well-being grew more pronounced. She sensed that something was amiss but was unsure how to address it. Her anxiety was compounded by Ethan's increasingly obsessive behavior regarding the letters and his investigation. The tension between mother and son reached a boiling point. One evening, when Ethan confronted Helen about the lack of transparency in their family history. During dinner, he expressed his frustration over the vague responses he had received and accused Helen of hiding the truth about Margaret's past. The argument escalated, with Helen accusing Ethan of being insensitive and reckless. "You don't understand how difficult it is for her," Helen shouted, her voice trembling with emotion. "Margaret has been through a lot, and your constant probing isn't helping anyone." Ethan was taken aback by his mother's reaction. He had hoped that Helen would support his quest for the truth, but instead, he faced a wall of resistance. The argument left Ethan feeling isolated and more determined than ever to uncover the secrets that had driven a wedge between his family members. As Ethan delved deeper into the investigation, he discovered more about Robert Sinclair's life and the circumstances surrounding his disappearance. He learned that Robert had been involved in a controversial article that had upset several powerful individuals in the town. The article had exposed corruption and malfeasance, making Robert a target for those who had something to lose. The revelation added a new layer of complexity to Ethan's investigation. It seemed that Robert's disappearance was not a mere coincidence, but was connected to larger issues of power and influence. Ethan began to suspect that Margaret's affair with Robert was more than just a romantic entanglement. It might have been tied to dangerous and unresolved conflicts. Despite the mounting pressure and the growing tension within the family, Ethan remained focused on his goal. He continued to gather information, piecing together the story of Robert and Margaret's relationship. His quest for the truth was driven by a need to understand the hidden aspects of his grandmother's life and to uncover the reasons behind Robert's disappearance. The deeper Ethan dug, the more he realized that the secrets he was uncovering were not just about Margaret and Robert, but were intertwined with the lives of those around him. The investigation had set off a chain reaction that was slowly unraveling the carefully constructed facade of the Harper family. The mounting pressure and the revelations that came to light were setting the stage for a dramatic and tragic turn of events. As Ethan prepared to confront Margaret with his findings, he could not foresee the explosive consequences of his actions. The hidden truths of the past were on the verge of colliding with the present, and the fallout would have far-reaching implications for everyone involved. The stage was set for a confrontation that would expose the dark undercurrents of the Harper family's seemingly perfect life, leading to a dramatic and unforeseen climax. The revelations Ethan had uncovered about his grandmother's past had stirred a storm of emotions and conflicts within the Harper family. The secrets hidden in the attic had begun to unravel the carefully maintained illusion of their perfect life. As Ethan prepared to confront Margaret with the full extent of his findings, the air was thick with tension and foreboding. It was a cool, crisp evening when Ethan decided to confront Margaret. The house was quiet, save for the occasional creak of the wooden floors and the distant rustling of leaves outside. The once warm and inviting home now felt oppressive, its walls seemingly closing in on the secrets that had been uncovered. Ethan's heart raced as he steeled himself for the confrontation. He was determined to get answers, no matter the cost. Ethan found Margaret in the parlor, a room that had always been her sanctuary. She was seated by the fireplace, a book open in her lap, though her eyes were distant and unfocused. Her usually impeccable appearance was marred by a wariness that had become increasingly evident. As Ethan approached, Margaret looked up, her eyes reflecting a mixture of resignation and apprehension. "Grandmother," Ethan began, his voice steady but tinged with an edge of resolve. "We need to talk about the letters I found in the attic." Margaret's face tightened, and she closed the book with a deliberate, measured movement. "Ethan, I've been trying to protect you from this," she said softly, her voice betraying a hint of fear. "Some things are better left buried." Ignoring her plea, Ethan continued, "I found out a lot about Robert Sinclair. I know he disappeared under suspicious circumstances. I need to know the full story. What really happened between you two?" Margaret's composure cracked. She stood up abruptly, her face flushed with emotion. "You don't understand, Ethan. There are things from the past that are too painful to revisit." Ethan's frustration boiled over. "I need answers. I can't just ignore this. You're keeping secrets that affect all of us." As Margaret's resolve began to crumble, she revealed fragments of the truth. She spoke of a passionate love affair with Robert Sinclair, who had been more than just a lover. He had been a source of immense joy and intense conflict. Their relationship had been fraught with danger, partly due to Robert's investigation into powerful figures in the town. His exposé had made them enemies, and the tension surrounding it had led to their tragic separation. The conversation escalated as Margaret recounted the events leading to Robert's disappearance. She described a confrontation with Robert that had turned violent. Their argument had centered around his decision to publish a damaging article about local officials who were deeply connected to the town's elite. Robert had been threatened and had gone into hiding, but his absence was followed by his presumed murder. The revelation was a jarring shock to Ethan. The man whose letters had spoken of love and longing was now painted as a victim of a larger, more dangerous conspiracy. Margaret's sorrow was palpable as she described the emotional toll of the affair and the guilt she had carried over Robert's fate. As the discussion grew more intense, Ethan's anger and frustration reached a boiling point. "Why didn't you tell me any of this before? Why keep it a secret?" Margaret's voice cracked with desperation. "Because the truth is too dangerous. I was trying to protect you from the consequences of our past mistakes." The confrontation reached a breaking point when Helen entered the room, having overheard the argument. Her face was a mask of worry and frustration. "What's going on here?" she demanded. "Why are you stirring up old wounds?" The presence of Helen added a new dimension to the conflict. The argument turned into a chaotic exchange of accusations and revelations. Ethan accused Helen of complicity in the cover-up, while Helen defended her own actions, claiming she had tried to keep the family together amidst the turmoil. The emotional intensity of the situation reached its peak, with each family member's repressed anger and pain coming to the surface. In the heat of the argument, Margaret, feeling cornered and desperate, seized a letter opener from a nearby desk. She brandished it defensively, her emotions spiraling out of control. The scene became a chaotic blur as Ethan and Margaret's confrontation escalated into a physical struggle. During the struggle, the letter opener was accidentally thrust forward. Ethan, caught off guard, was struck in the chest. The force of the impact knocked him backward, and he fell to the floor, gasping for breath. The room was filled with a sudden, eerie silence as the gravity of what had just happened sank in. Margaret's eyes widened in horror as she looked at the blood-stained letter opener. The realization of the accidental stabbing hit her like a tidal wave. Her initial shock gave way to panic as she dropped the weapon and rushed to Ethan's side. Helen's reaction was one of utter dismay. She screamed, her voice echoing through the house as she frantically tried to stop the bleeding. The chaos of the scene was overwhelming, and the house that had once been a symbol of family unity now bore witness to a tragedy. Margaret and Helen's immediate attempts to handle the situation were frantic and disorganized. Margaret, in her panic, attempted to clean up the scene, while Helen called for emergency help. The gravity of the situation was clear, and the once quiet home was now filled with the sounds of sirens and frantic activity. When the police arrived, the scene was chaotic. Ethan was rushed to the hospital, but despite the best efforts of medical personnel, his injuries were too severe. The news of his death sent shockwaves through the family and the community. The once tight-knit Harper family was now shattered, its members grappling with the weight of their actions and the devastating consequences of their secrets. The subsequent investigation revealed the details of the confrontation and the tragic circumstances that led to Ethan's death. The police interviewed Margaret and Helen, their conflicting stories and emotional responses painting a picture of a family in turmoil. The evidence and testimonies painted a tragic portrait of a confrontation gone horribly wrong.